And so Socrates uh, comes up with this synthesizing story of his thought, right, in the form of a parable. Or at least that's what I am calling it, the parable of the cave. It's usually known as the allegory of the cave, right? But I choose to use the word parable because I think a parable does some different things in allegory, and a parable is ultimately uh, coincides or coheres to Socratic thinking on a larger level. So he's coming up with this parable, right? Now, most people think a parable, like an allegory, is a very sort of didactic type thing, that it's supposed to impart, a lesson and a storyline, a moral, or something like that. So it's oftentimes considered as a relatively primitive and simplistic device. I would challenge that. I would say that the parable is a very sophisticated device, not for knowledge, not to tell us, how to do things, not for behavioral modification, right? But to get us to think. A parable is ultimately operating on a metaphorical level. So, a metaphor is a way of thinking which connects images and text together in an associative way. Okay? And so the parable is operating in a metaphorical way, not a real grammatical or hierarchical way, right? It's not trying to get us to one idea or one answer, really. The parable is trying to, uh, get us to a higher level of thinking and then keep us going, right? So the parable is sort of infinite thinking. A good parable, when it is constructed, sort of explodes in your brain, right? That you read it and you think you got it, you think you got the lesson, and then all these other questions arise and you continue thinking. And so the parable is, yeah, like I said, it's a real dynamic type thing. It seems simplistic. It is oftentimes interpreted in a simplistic way by teachers and students alike, right? It's oftentimes thought of, oh, this is what the author is really trying to get through. Um, and so, but it's not really that. I think the author is really trying to put a text and a thinking bubble into our brain. Socrates and Jesus both were big parable writers, and if you ever read their parables and see the response, it's not like people are saying, "Oh, I get it." Everyone's sort of shaking their head and like, "What?" And that's really the effect of parable, that it keeps us thinking. It doesn't stop.